Okay. Okay. You ready? Okay, good morning. Good to see each of you again. This is a little weird because I did an intro to the book of Joshua 3 weeks ago. So we've had a extended break from this material. But I guess I should say it's good to be back. We had a good week out in Seattle, south of Seattle, Steilacoom, something. On the Puget Sound. Baby's doing well.
How's Mom doing? I thought maybe you'd
And Mom's doing well too. Yeah, I know. I was thinking I should have wedged one in here somewhere. Maybe next week. I had the presentation done already, so. But Amy's got pictures if you're curious. He's cute. Kind of takes after his grandpa, yeah. His other grandpa. Yeah, not me. Good. So, hoping to cover Joshua chapter 1 this morning, and I'm roughly planning to do a chapter at a time. We'll see how that works. I may go, if I can, I may go a little quicker than that in some of the center section of the book where it's the allotment of the tribal territories, but I haven't actually finished prepping that yet, so we'll see how it goes. But by and large, I'm hoping to do a chapter at a time. God keeps his promises. I think that's the major overarching message of this book. Do you know why? What promise is it in particular?
The promised land.
Promised land. Yes, exactly. He had promised that to Abraham centuries earlier. And we had hundreds of years down in Egypt. And then God brought the people out of the land of Egypt. And now finally, this book records his giving of the land to them. And that's a huge fulfillment of a promise that God made. Probably some things to chew on there as far as God's timing. His promises don't always come to pass immediately, which is what we often expect. But God often is patient and waits. But yes, the overarching theme, I think if I was going to take one message away from the book of Joshua, it would be that God keeps his promises. Anybody recognize my background picture here? I talked about that a little bit in our introductory. But it's not just a random picture.
It's what Moses saw.
It's what Moses saw. Thank you. Yeah, Hannah's right. The photographer is standing on Mount Nebo, looking to the west, across the Jordan River Valley, into the Promised Land. is exactly what Moses did before he died. You can see the northern end of the Dead Sea, and then this dark strip is the Jordan River Valley. It's the Jordan River bed. And then faintly in the background, the hills of Canaan, to become the hills of Judah and Samaria further to the north. So yes, it's a photo from the doorstep, if you will, to the Promised Land as the Israelites approached. Okay. Everybody have a handout? Malachi has more if somebody's missing one. Okay. At least I asked. I've approached this chapter sort of with a series of questions that I think that the text answers for us. And the first one is, how is it that Joshua became the new leader? The book opens up and he's the guy. How does that come to pass? It doesn't give us a whole lot of background. And so I'd like to address that just briefly. If you have your Bible open to Joshua, you can just turn back a page, or maybe it's on the same page for you. Deuteronomy chapter 34 records the death of Moses. That's the last thing we have before the introduction to the book of Joshua. Pretty much all of Deuteronomy chapter 34 is a record of his death. I'll come back to that in just a moment. Why did Moses die before entering the Promised Land? Yeah, he was disobedient. God told him to speak to the rock and it would flow with water in the wilderness. And instead, he smacked it with a stick.
Well, that's what he did the first time.
It's what he did the first time, yeah. But God took offense at that, said, you have dishonored me before the people. And because of that, you will not be allowed to enter the land. That's in Numbers chapter 20. I have a little bit of text there even. God says, because you did not trust me enough to demonstrate my holiness to the people of Israel, you will not lead them into the land that I am giving to them. And there's an artist's picture of Moses at the rock there. Interestingly enough, Numbers chapter 27, and you don't have to turn there. You could if you want. I'm going to read a little bit of that to you, and I'll give you just a couple of lines on the slide. Moses had laid his hands on Joshua as the next leader. I'm starting in Numbers 27:15. Then Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, may the Lord, the God of the spirits and of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation who will go out and come in before them. That's a military term, to go out to battle and to come back from. Who will lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be like sheep which have no shepherd. So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him, and have him stand before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and commission him in their sight. And you shall put some of your authority on him, in order that all the congregation of the sons of Israel may obey him. Moreover, he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire for him by the judgment of the Urim before the Lord. The Urim and the Thummim, well, we don't know exactly what they were, but a way of divining an answer from God. A lot of scholars think they were a couple of stones that had multiple sides or something like that. At his command they shall go out, and at his command they shall come in, both he and the sons of Israel with him, even all the congregation. And Moses did, just as the Lord commanded him. And he took Joshua, set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation. And then he laid his hands on him and commissioned him just as the Lord had spoken through Moses. So Moses had laid his hands on, commissioned, I don't know quite which word to use here. Well, God had chosen Joshua, and Moses had, before all the people, assigned him as the next leader. And this, again, was decades before the death of Moses. Do you remember Joshua was one of the 12 spies that went up into the land before the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness? So he had already shown himself faithful in that. He was one of 2 that came back and said, yes, we can take it. And the other 10 said, no, we can't. So that's kind of background to what we jump into here in Joshua chapter 1, where Joshua is the leader. He's the guy. There's history behind it. God had actually chosen him decades earlier as that guy. Back to the end of Deuteronomy chapter 34. Moses ascended from the deserts of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the summit of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho, and the Lord showed him the whole land. And we don't know exactly how that happened. Did God give him unusual vision to be able to see further than a human could normally see? Did God carry him some way, somewhere? We don't know exactly. There's a fair bit that you can see from Mount Nebo, but I mean, you saw a photo. It wasn't panoramic, but can't see much detail from that distance. But you can see the land. But he could have seen that even as he was approaching this area. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. Here is a photograph of Mount Nebo from down on the plain. So you can see the height that it presents. It's nothing like the Rockies. It's more like, well, we've probably almost got some bluffs across the river that are about that high. Or maybe some of the so-called mountains down in Missouri, that kind of thing. A little different photographic view from up on Nebo. You can perhaps pick out the northern end of the Dead Sea here. This darker area is the oasis of Jericho. Everything around it is dry, dusty, rocky dirt. But where there's water from the Jericho spring, they can irrigate, and they have bananas and whatever else you want to grow there. And the Jordan River. And then the plains of Moab, that's where Israel was encamped at this time. Down on the plain out in front of Mount Nebo. And I have a map here. So here's Mount Nebo. We were looking across this direction, and the Israelites encamped on the plains of Moab down here. And then across the Jordan River, we have the city of Jericho, which is down at the base of the hills, but still on the flat plain. Okay, and then the notice of the death of Moses. Moses, the servant of the Lord, died in the land of Moab, just as the Lord had said. And the Lord buried him in a valley near Beth Peor in Moab. But to this day, no one knows the exact place. There's an enigmatic statement for you. How do we know it was in the valley of Beth Peor? But we don't know where. Did Israelites, scouts or something, watch the body head that direction? Or I don't know. It's a fascinating statement, and I have more questions than answers about that.
The Lord didn't want them to worship.
Yeah. They weren't to worship him or the place that he was buried.
People tend to do that.
But then we see him reappear like on the Mount of Transfiguration. So, okay. We do have one other fascinating statement in the book of Jude. This is in a different context and a different argument, but even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not himself dare to condemn him for slander, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." There's another interesting statement, right? It's the only thing that we know other than what's written here in Deuteronomy and Joshua about the death of Moses. But apparently there was some kind of dispute over his body between the devil and Michael the archangel. You hadn't realized that the devil was not fond of clothes. I know some people are thinking that. I don't know why they do that. Artists are their own crazy breed. Okay. So that was verses 1 and 2. I guess I didn't even read that with you, and I probably should. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel." First couple of verses there. What was Joshua supposed to do? Verses 3 and 4. "Every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given it to you, just as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and as far as the great sea toward the setting of the sun, will be your territory." So we begin with the statement, "Every place your foot treads, I will give to you." That photo may not be very self-explanatory, so I'll give you a hint. It's a clay roof tile. It's got a little Roman legion stamp on it, so it's later than the time of Joshua by a millennia and a half. And it's got a bunch of dots on it. Do you have any idea what the dots might be? What? It's a footprint. Do you have dots at the bottom of your foot like that? No. It's a footprint from a Roman soldier's sandal. They put little metal studs on the bottom of their sandals to help them wear longer. Archaeologists sometimes find those little studs along narrow trails where Roman soldiers walked a lot. It's supposed to be representative of God's promise here. Everywhere your foot treads, I will give to you. And then he lays out kind of an interesting description of the land. It's quite general. It gives the broad northern and southern borders from the wilderness to Lebanon. The wilderness would be in the south. Beersheba is about the southern edge of what is cultivable, and beyond that is desert, so that's wilderness. Kadesh Barnea is an oasis out of the wilderness. And then up in the north we have Lebanon. Then he gives Euphrates and Mediterranean. The Euphrates is not on here. It runs out this direction. And of course the Mediterranean on the west. So kind of the east to west. All of this is desert. And nobody wants it even today. It's empty, virtually. And then he mentions the Hittites, which are the same thing in this context as Canaanites. There are a few different groups that are referred to as Hittites in the Old Testament. There are local Canaanite Hittites. There's a Hittite kingdom further to the north. That's not what this is talking about. So basically the entire country here is what he refers to. Verses 5 to 9, I think, answer the question how Joshua is to accomplish this. And I've put the whole text up here because I want to highlight a couple things for you. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I've been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Did you pick up any repetition in there? Yeah. Give me a phrase. Yes, I heard it.
Strong and courageous.
Be strong and courageous. Yeah. Three times that's repeated in this pretty short section. He's interested in getting that point across. You need to buck up, Joshua. Don't be fearful. Go in and take the land. Now you can understand why he might be fearful. It's kind of unknown. They're fortified cities. He's going to send out spies to check out Jericho in particular in the next chapter. But God says, don't be fearful. Be strong and be courageous. Another way you could say that, I think, is obey me. I'm sending you in. Just do it. Don't be timid and uncertain and I'm not sure if I can do this or doesn't look like we have enough guys. It's so reminiscent of Gideon to me. God just keeps reducing his forces until he's down to 300 guys against an absolute mammoth army of Amalekites. God said, that's enough. That's enough. Another interesting one in here that I'd like to point out is that God specifically tells him, you need to read and know the law, my word. And of course, the point of reading and knowing it is to obey it. But you need to be obedient to what I've given you in the law of Moses.
Kris,
Yes.
is it likely that Joshua could read?
Yes. That's a great question. Is it likely that Joshua could read? Oh man, see, you're going to sidetrack me here. The question of literacy at this period is just fascinating. To the south we have Egyptian hieroglyphs, which are very difficult to read. You have to do a lot of schooling in them before you can begin to read them, because it's not alphabetic. Hundreds of signs to learn, even if you speak the language. And to the north, Assyrian, Babylonian, Old Babylonian, cuneiform stuff, same thing. You don't just learn 26 letters in the alphabet. There are hundreds of signs. So literacy rates in those two areas that kind of bounded the Israelite area were in single digits. But I've read a number of estimates that think among Israelites who had the alphabet, it was invented a few centuries, 400 or 500 years before this time. Say 300 or 400 years. literacy rates in ancient Israel may have been as much as 50%, which is way beyond anything around them. And part of the reason we think that may be true is because of the inscriptions that we find in remote locations that'll have something like the alphabet written out and then a little poem or some things like that. That they're obviously not the court records of the king or something official like that. It's just some kid out somewhere. And we have a couple of references to that in the book of Judges too. I don't know if you remember Gideon coming back from chasing the Amalekites, captures a kid outside of town and says, "Write down for me the names of the elders of your city, and we'll let you go." Well, the kid's obviously literate, and this is out in the middle of nowhere. It's a fascinating question. So yes, I'm quite convinced that Joshua was literate and was able to read. Yeah, we kind of take for granted our own literacy in our own culture, which is widespread and kind of cool. Yeah, and we do find Joshua writing later on as well. Yeah, great question. That didn't take too long. I need to bring some stars and just have a little sheet up here. I would give you a little gold sticker. Good question. Okay. Yeah, I heard that giggle. I didn't read that. Yeah, I did too. 5 through 9. So verse 10, I think answers the question, what did Joshua do about this? Joshua commanded the officers of the people and said, "Pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, saying, prepare provisions for yourselves, for within 3 days you are to cross this Jordan and go in to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess it." So there you have your answer. Did he listen and obey? Absolutely, and right away. As soon as God told him this, he went out and told the people, "Get your stuff together. Maybe make some provisions to carry along to eat, some snack food. Do your laundry, whatever you got to do. We're packing camp and be ready to move within 3 days." And we actually know it took 6 before they moved, but he told them to prep and be ready to go right away. Granola bars? That's what we'd take. Can you make goat jerky in 3 days? Can you smoke it? Maybe? I don't know. Whatever your favorite snack is. Okay. The rest of this section, 12 to 18, addresses a question that I know has been on your mind, and you just haven't expressed it yet. What about the 3 tribes that had already settled into their territory on the eastern side of the Jordan? You were all wondering that.
What about the 2.5 tribes that were settled in on the east side?
Yes, that's a great question, Rick. In fact, that's exactly where this text leads. Thank you for asking that. I need my chart. Another sticker for a great question. He answers that question. Let's see here. Moses had been approached by representatives of those 3 tribes, 2.5, and they asked him, "Can we settle in this area?" Which technically was not the promised land. It kind of depends on how you define it. But in a narrow sense at least, the promised land is west of the Jordan. I should point this way for you. And they wanted to settle east of the Jordan. Numbers 32, Moses responds to them, "If you'll do this, if you'll arm yourselves before the Lord for war, and all of you armed men cross over the Jordan before the Lord, until he has driven his enemies out from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then afterward you shall return and be free of obligation toward the Lord and toward Israel." and this land shall be yours for a possession before the Lord. And they agreed to that. They had made the pact with Moses and said, we'll go over and fight along with our brothers if we can actually end up living over here. And Moses had agreed to that. I should read some of this. Chapter 1, verse 12. To the Reubenites and the Gadites and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God will give you rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your cattle shall remain in the land which Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But you shall cross before your brothers in battle array. All of your valiant warriors, you shall help them until the Lord gives your brothers rest, as he gives you, and they also possess the land which the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to your own land and possess that which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise. I maybe would have summarized that in fewer sentences, but you get the gist, right? So, Joshua here is reiterating the pact that they had made with Moses earlier on. This map shows you roughly the areas that were settled by Reuben in the south, Gad in the middle, and then half of the tribe of Manasseh to the north. The other half of Manasseh settled on the western side. Reuben, the area there in blue, is essentially the land of Moab. And then Gad is green, and the lower part of the purple, that's what we call Gilead. And then clear up in the north, has a couple of names. Bashan is one of them. Bashan? Modern day Golan Heights, so sometimes referred to as the Golan. There's been some back and forth over the previous decades between Syria and Israel. It's sort of a no man's land in some ways today. Let me just show you one photo from each of those areas. This is down in the south. Reuben, they're part of their territory, and you can tell we're up on the bluff, if you will, overlooking the Dead Sea, which is to the west. All of this is good land for raising sheep and goats and cattle further to the north. You can do some olives and grapes a little bit, but it's not good cropland like some of what's on the other side of the Jordan. So that's down in the south. In the middle, the area where Gad was settled is pretty rough. At the same time, relatively green. Again, it's a good grazing area. Because of the steepness and the rockiness, it's hard to plant a whole lot there. So this is part of that area we would call Gilead. And then up to the north, the Golan region, or Bashan, is good cattle country. Scattered trees grow up there. You can see some of the mountains of Lebanon in the background. They're kind of hazy, but they're there. So that's a view looking northward. So that was the land which these three tribes had settled. The Israelites had conquered this area while Moses was still alive. And so Joshua here reminds them of their pact with Moses. And the implication is, are you going to come through on it? And so then we have their response in 16 to 18. They answered Joshua, saying, all that you've commanded us, we will do. And wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. anyone who rebels against your command and does not obey your words and all that you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. Which sounds kind of godlike. Maybe they had heard that and were just reaffirming that to him. So, the stage is set. Pretty much everything has come together here. God has reaffirmed to Joshua, you're my leader. You need to know my word. You need to be strong and courageous. Get the people ready. Joshua turns to the folks that have made a pact and said they would come along even though they're already settled, and says, are you guys with us? And the reply is, you betcha. I almost said we've got your back, but they were going to go in first. So we hope you got our back, if you will. A couple of points to ponder here. I do think that God has called us also to be strong and courageous, just like he did to Joshua, for a different purpose and in a different context, of course. But 1 Corinthians 16:13, Paul says, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. So, if you're a follower of Jesus, choose my words carefully here. I think this works. Don't be a weenie. Right? And don't be wishy-washy about your faith.
Amen.
Pay attention. Be strong. Act like men. And ladies, you know what that means. That applies to you too, in its own way. Stand firm in the faith. We're bombarded with stuff every day. Don't give in. That's a decision that you make mentally. Am I going to continue down that road? Am I going to give myself over to those evil influences? Or am I going to be obedient? We know what the right thing is to do. 9 times out of 10, it's not even a question. Do it. Stand firm in the faith. Paul says in Ephesians 6:11 and 12, put on the full armor of God that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. If you're not paying attention to that stuff, you'll be overcome by it. So, again, be strong and stand firm. In many ways, we're not even called to the kind of... Was Joshua here called to kind of an aggressive, a conquest? We're not, is this fair to say, not called so much to conquer the world and reduce everything that stands in our way. We're called to stand firm. Yes, we're called to spread the gospel, to be a light, to be salt. But there are a lot of references to that kind of thing. Just standing firm, not backing up, not trying to take on the devil in hand-to-hand combat, but putting up your defenses against him too, and not turning and running. It's a common New Testament theme. And then, like Joshua, I think our response should be quick and obedient. It sounds like he stepped away from his meeting with God and said to the tribes, get ready. You don't pick up any kind of delay in there. I got to think about this a little while. He just did it. And I hope we are the same way. God does not come down to us and tell us, okay, go conquer the Holy Land. He speaks to us in different ways. You read his word, you run across an admonition, what do you do about it? You listen to Pastor Gary, and he challenges you in a way to do something. What do you do with that? You hear a song, you hear a preacher on the radio, in one ear, out the other, or you mull it over and act on it. And we see a great example here, I think, in Joshua. Okay, I have my commission. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to do it. So even already in this first chapter, a couple of things I think for us to emulate. Questions? Comments? I see that hand.
With the half-tribe and Gad and Reuben going across the river, would they have had to be worried about anyone attacking their wives and children early in the morning?
Would the tribes going with Joshua from the eastern side, Gad, Reuben, Manasseh, had to worry about their families left at home? My assumption would be that they left some folks there, a handful, whatever that means, to guard property and people. They would, I believe, they would have also had some fortified cities, and they would have had communication, I think, pretty constantly with the rest of the group that went across. So if somebody does look like a threat, they could have run back. But by and large, they had conquered that region, and aside from the far northern and southern borders, I wouldn't expect there would be any major threat to them. They had conquered those areas. And to the south, there was a massive canyon that separated them from the Edomites. And they would have known if somebody was starting to come across or that kind of thing. So, yeah, good question. It's the best guess I can hazard.
One other question too. You said technically the promised land was west of the Jordan, but it does mention the Euphrates.
Yeah.
Did the kingdom ever reach that far, or the territory ever reach that far?
Ooh, did the territory taken by Solomon was ruler over the area at its largest extent, and to the north, which would probably be in some ways the closest direction by which they could reach the Euphrates. To my knowledge, well, they never owned the land that far. They had influence. What's a good example? Where they controlled, they could tax an area. They had that much control over it, but they didn't actually have, it wasn't just full of Israelites. It was still foreign people. Some of Solomon's northern territories were like that. So no, I think I would answer in some ways they never got as far north as the Euphrates. That's a great question.
Maybe that's future.
Yeah, there could be a future aspect to that prophecy as well. I agree. The reason I say that the stuff to the east of the Jordan was technically not within the confines of the Holy Land is largely because of the way these tribes ask if they can settle there instead of crossing over. They're like, can we just have this? And if it was naturally part of the allotment, you think, well, of course, why do you even ask? But, yeah, the borders shifted continually. And some of that, like the area you saw there where Reuben had in the south, they did not keep real long. The Moabites reasserted themselves, and many of the kings of Judah fought with Moabites that were living in that. Their kingdom was that area that you see as Reuben there. That's also where Ruth was from. So, at one time, tribal territory of Reuben, but she was a Moabitess. Yeah.
That's section 5 through 9, where it said be strong and courageous. It also opens and closes with, I will be with you.
Thank you. That's a great point. I will be with you. Yeah. Yeah, that's really key, isn't it? He's not just saying, go, and you're on your own. Yeah, that's the rationale for why you can be courageous and strong.
The standard goes to us today as well.
Yes, yes, yes. God is with us too. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent point.
I think even before that, when you go back to Deuteronomy, that Moses laid his hands on him,
Mhm.
and he was filled with the Spirit.
Yeah.
He's like right there.
Yeah, my
Being
spirit
filled
is on
with the
him.
Spirit to be wise and courageous.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
not doing it on his own.
Yeah, just like Moses in a lot of ways. Yeah. Yeah, Joshua turns out to be a good, solid, faithful servant. The people under his direction don't always do everything that they're supposed to. But Joshua himself is a faithful man. I got to quit. Okay, I'm not seeing any other pressing questions. So let me close this in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for your word, and especially for this section in Joshua. I pray that you would continue to bring this stuff to our minds through the week. Help us to consider Joshua as an example of how we should behave. And I pray that we would be quick to obey you. I pray that we would be strong and courageous in our faith and in following you and doing what is right, even though often it is difficult. Give us the strength to do that. We are not strong on our own. We know that, and we need you and your Spirit to empower us. And so we ask you to do that and help us to be faithful witnesses of yours. In your name I pray. Amen.